Hello there, governors. Hi, class. Today we're going to be doing a read aloud, think aloud activity with Ron Simon's The Soldier Stories. This is very important to our class because it's going to be a primary source document. Right now we're talking about Vietnam. I'm going to be reading an excerpt out of the book, out of this collection of letters and interviews by Ron Simon from Hank Ulen, who's a door gunner with the 1st Cavalry. We're going to pick up his story. We already know about the Tet Offensive. We know about the ceasefire that was supposed to be going on during Tet, and there was a massive attack, coordinated attack from the North Vietnamese all the way through South Vietnam. So I'm just going to be reading this and modeling how I want you guys to be thinking of it. I'm going to model a few strategies. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to follow it up with a lesson afterwards. So I'm just going to begin. It was my first contact with Marines. They would come over and fill our sandbags for protection to put around our helicopters just so they could eat our chow, our hot chow, which was quite often. I don't know what they were feeding them. We had a helicopter company and we had a little more flexibility in getting food and beer. More than one time we would pull our money and send a ship. I don't know if we were allowed to, down country and come back with a pallet of beer and ice. So right away you can just kind of tell the mood of the entire story is probably going to be a little bit more negative. They're scrapping for food, they're scrapping for beer, anything they could get, anything that reminds them of home. It was just routine flights until the end of January. Remember, January 31st was the Asian New Year, so that's the Tet. So we're going to be picking up toward the end of January. It was just routine flights until the end of January when the Tet Offensive started. At that time, I flew over Hue City into our campsite. The city was intact. It was a beautiful city. When Tet started and the Marines and the fighting started, my next vision of the city was total chaos. A large portion of the city was already in ruins. The city was burning. It was in flames. And we'd have to remember from the lesson, we already know that what LBJ and what the presidents have been telling the American people this entire time were how we were winning the war, how the North Vietnamese were very close to surrendering, and then they're done listening to the president, they flip on the nightly news, and all of a sudden, bam, they see Saigon, which is supposed to be the safest place in the entire South Vietnamese country, in flames. There's massive destruction. There's North Vietnamese, there's Viet Cong, the guerrilla troops running around, and there's Americans dying. You go back to that area that you've seen a couple days before, and it wasn't there anymore. The buildings weren't there. There was a lot of smoke. There was a mass exodus of civilians from the city. I have no knowledge of an offensive buildup. We weren't privy to information. As a draftee, my primary mission was to survive 12 months and return home in one piece. When Tet broke, the fighting was really intense. I got pretty nervous and a lot of concern about surviving. So once again, we have to observe the mood. A lot of soldiers we know just from our World War II lesson also. During World War II, a lot of the soldiers their average age was 24. They had a college degree, and then and they believed in what they were fighting in. The average age of soldiers in Vietnam was 19. They didn't have a college degree. They didn't even have a high school degree. So we're going to get a lot of younger kids. And real quick, I'm going to do a text to self. My dad was in Vietnam, and he was actually drafted right after the Tet Offensive started. So that's my text to self connection. I know I'm a little bit older than you guys, and my dad is actually way older, obviously. But there's still a good amount of Vietnam veterans out there, so if you have any in your family, that can be a good text-to-self connection. A good text-to-text, since we're talking about really good primary source material just from different wars. So I'm going to give you a variety of different wars. So this is Vietnam. I got a really good one that I enjoy, this author, this historian, Stephen E. Ambrose, if you can see that. Citizen Soldier. I have another one over there when he wrote a book on D-Day. These are all first-hand accounts that this historian built up by himself. The next one I'm going to have is a pretty recent book, The Last No Easy Day by Mark Owen, one of the soldiers that actually was on the strike team, the SEAL strike team that killed Osama bin Laden. So these are all really good primary source, on-the-ground materials. Ambrose is more of a historian, so he does base a lot of his stuff on primary source material, so you get a lot of good information there. Most of the times when I'm going to pick up again, so most of the times when you go into the LZ, you won't even see the enemy. You could see the muzzle flashes, you'd see the tracers coming at the ship, but the enemy was very elusive. Actually, they're hiding, running for their cover, so very seldom you see the enemy, at least from my perspective. Landing and leaving in the Hue area, there was enemy actually running in the streets. You could see enemy At that point, there was in one experience that I had not had before, to actually visualize shooting at someone to return fire to someone that you could actually visualize is a lot different than return fire into the brush. And I had to adjust that. It's not easy. Firing is a natural instinct to protect themselves, but when you're being fired on, you're not going to protect yourselves and return fire. It's a lot but it's a lot easier when you don't see who you're shooting at. There are a lot of civilians in the streets. With altitude, it's tough to determine who's who. The men in uniform, our guys, are much easier to see. Sometimes they weren't always sure who you were returning to fire on. At least I couldn't be sure. So good text to world. There's a lot of fighting going on in the Middle East. A lot of our troops. A lot of the concerns that um, Hank Lewin just vented to us. A lot of the concerns he had were the concerns that our soldiers are dealing with over in the Middle East. They don't really know who they're fighting. The Viet Cong, the guerrilla military force during Vietnam, was very elusive. During the day, they'd be dressed as farmers, and at night they'd be shooting at you, dropping mortars in your base. That's a lot of the same things that they're dealing with in the Middle East. They don't really know who they're fighting because there's no uniformed soldiers for the most part. So that's a good text-to-world connection that you guys need to be making as you're reading, as along to this text itself, and then the text-to-text. Somebody would be in trouble. You knew what you're going to. Somebody would be in trouble, and you knew you were going to probably have to go in there and help out. Maybe you were going to get them into trouble someday. You didn't really know what your day was going to pan out. There. Each day was different. Some days were easy, some days weren't. Transporting body bags was a little difficult to deal with. There was one particular time we were transporting body bags and blood was leaking out of the bags. The blood built up on the aircraft floor. See, it's kind of tough to talk about. So if you guys have ever had any kind of injuries, any kind of thing, any kind of event happen to you where there's blood, maybe a broken bone, maybe a broken arm, you could just do a good text to world or text to self analysis here and just magnify it by 1,000 times because these guys are dealing with bodies, these guys are dealing with blood, all that nasty stuff. Okay, well, I'm just going to cut it right there. I think this is really constructive. I was just going to want to model how I want you guys to be reading these texts as we're working through this lesson. And then a good follow-up lesson. I need you guys to read that chapter tonight by Hank Lewin, and then just do the analysis of text itself, text to text, and text to world. Just one short sentence for each one. Just explain it fully, and then I want you guys to do a review of that chapter. So basically the main ideas, and that'll be due tomorrow in class. All right. Have a good night, guys.